The mattress was entirely too soft. That was my first coherent thought as I sat on the edge of the king-sized bed, staring blankly at the reinforced glass of the bedroom window. Outside, the upstate New York winter was actively trying to murder the landscape, burying the towering pine trees under a thick, unforgiving blanket of snow. The wind howled against the glass, but inside the climate control hummed a sterile perfect 68 degrees. I pressed my thumb against my lower abdomen, feeling the slight, unfamiliar firmness there. 7 weeks. 2 bright pink lines on a cheap pharmacy stick, followed immediately by a $50,000 price tag, tightening like a noose around my neck. Ricky, my ex-alpha, had smelled like sour beer, stale tobacco, and sheer, pathetic cowardice when he finally confessed. 50 grand in underground gambling debts, wiped clean by an East Coast private holding company. In exchange, the syndicate acquired Ricky's only liquid asset, his bonded Omega, namely me. The bond had been legally forcefully dissolved on a Tuesday. By Thursday, I discovered I was pregnant. Now it was Friday, and I had been delivered. I wasn't a tragic prince in a fairy tale, and this wasn't a romantic rescue. I was a transaction. I was just an Omega with a maxed out credit card sold to pay for another man's mistakes. 3 hours ago, a heavily armored black SUV had dumped me at this architectural fortress, masquerading as a modern mansion. The owner was Dominic Vance. You didn't say that name out loud in the boroughs unless you wanted a broken jaw. He was a myth, a ruthless syndicate boss who controlled the docks and the underground networks of the eastern seaboard. He was also apparently my new owner. A man in a tailored charcoal suit, one of Vance's foot soldiers acting as a terrifying butler, had escorted me to this cavernous, sterile guest room. He had handed me a heavy matte black credit card. "Mr. Vance expects you to remain on the premises." The man had rumbled, his voice entirely devoid of warmth. "The card is for your necessities. Do not cause trouble." Then the heavy mahogany door had clicked shut, locking me in. Most Omegas would have collapsed onto the high thread count Egyptian cotton sheets and sobbed. They would have drowned in the despair of being sold to a Mafia boss, terrified of the violence and the crushing isolation that surely awaited them. They would have panicked. I didn't cry. Crying didn't burn calories, but it sure made you thirsty, and I couldn't afford to be thirsty. Not anymore. Instead, a cold, sharp survival instinct clawed its way up my throat, tasting like old pennies and stomach acid. My biology was screaming at me. Pregnant, vulnerable, cold. Prepare. My mind violently flashed back to 2 winters ago in a rotting, uninsulated apartment in Queens. Ricky had gambled away the heating money. I had spent 4 days wrapped in a single moth-eaten blanket, chewing on ice chips to stave off the hunger shaking so hard my teeth chipped against each other. I remembered the sheer animalistic panic of having absolutely nothing, the deep hollow ache in my ribs when the pantry was empty. Now there was a blueberry-sized cluster of cells inside me that demanded I never ever let that happen again. I looked down at the matte black card resting in my palm. It felt heavier than it looked. Unlimited limit. A billionaire syndicate boss's money. I didn't see a cage. I saw a heavily fortified supply drop. I pulled my smartphone from my worn sweatpants, ignoring the cracked screen, and immediately opened my shopping apps. The digital clock on the screen hit exactly midnight. Flash sale. My fingers flew across the screen with the ruthless precision of a trained sniper. The sterile, terrifying atmosphere of the Mafia stronghold completely faded into the background. I didn't care about Dominic Vance. I didn't care about the armed guards patrolling the frozen perimeter outside. I cared exclusively about bulk pricing. Add to cart. 50 mega rolls of 3-ply toilet paper. Add to cart. 10 jumbo boxes of newborn diapers size 0. Add to cart. 4 gallons of unscented baby wash, a heavy-duty thermal fleece blanket, and 20 packs of water-based wet wipes. My eyes burned bloodshot from exhaustion and pregnancy nausea, but I couldn't stop. The Omega nesting instinct was a feral, irrational beast, and right now it demanded I exploit the New York State tax loopholes. I slid off the ridiculously soft bed and sat cross-legged on the cold hardwood floor, frantically calculating the shipping fees in my head. If I bundle the wipes with the formula dispenser, I get the free expedited shipping. I muttered to the empty, cavernous room, violently biting my thumbnail as I scrolled through the lightning deals. Wait, the silicone pacifiers are 2 for 1. Add? I glanced up. In the upper corner of the room, a tiny red light blinked on a sleek black security camera. I knew someone was watching the feed. It was probably Vance himself sitting in some dark leather-bound study waiting for his newly acquired Omega to break. He was probably waiting for the tears, the begging, the desperate, pathetic plea for freedom. I stared directly into the glass lens of the camera. I didn't flinch. I didn't look scared. I just raised my phone, finalized a $1,200 order of sanitary supplies and plastic basins, and aggressively hit place order. I really hoped the terrifying syndicate boss had Amazon Prime. My first morning as the property of an East Coast crime syndicate began with the piercing beep of a delivery truck backing up the winding snow-covered driveway. I hadn't slept. I'd spent the remaining hours of the night pacing the length of the absurdly massive bedroom, compiling a mental inventory of my assets. Asset 1, my sheer stubbornness. Asset 2, a billionaire's credit card. Asset 3, the 36 packages currently being unloaded onto the pristine Italian marble of the foyer. I patted down the grand sweeping staircase wearing oversized sweatpants and a thick gray hoodie. The air in the house was freezing, reeking of synthetic lemon cleaner and a tense, jagged silence. Standing in the foyer was a man who looked like a walking brick wall in a tailored suit. A dark, jagged tattoo crept up the side of his thick neck, disappearing behind his ear. He was glaring at the mountain of Amazon Prime boxes as if they were a rival cartel. "What is this?" the guard grunted. His voice sounded like it had been dragged over gravel. "Necessities," I replied, my voice completely flat. I walked past him, grabbing the first box. "Are you just going to stand there looking menacing, or are you going to help me carry these? Because my back already hurts, and if I trip and fall, your boss is going to be short a $50,000 investment." The guard stared at me. He was an alpha used to Omegas dropping their gaze and baring their necks. I just crossed my arms over my chest and stared back. After a 10-second standoff, he blinked, deeply confused by my lack of self-preservation, and wordlessly picked up 3 heavy boxes at once. "Wait," I said, pulling out my cracked phone. "What's your name?" "Marcus," he rumbled suspiciously. "Listen, Marcus, have you ever used the shopping discount app No Great? Take out your phone. I'm going to send you a referral link. If you download it and create an account, I get a $20 credit and you get a coupon for protein powder or whatever it is you people eat. Do it now. The code expires in 10 minutes. Marcus, a man who probably disposed of bodies for a living, mechanically pulled out his phone and downloaded the app under my critical, unblinking supervision. Survival wasn't always about fighting. Sometimes it was about aggressive networking. Before I could force the rest of the night shift security team into my multi-level marketing scheme, the temperature in the foyer suddenly dropped. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. The air soured, smelling like raw, uninsulated wire sparking against wet earth. They arrived like a localized hurricane. 4 boys, maybe 5 years old. They looked identical, messy dark hair, pale skin, and terrifying, bruised slate eyes. They didn't walk, they prowled. They hit the bottom step of the staircase and immediately zeroed in on me. The tallest one, Leo, I presumed, dropped into a low crouch. He bared his small teeth, and a vibrating chest-deep snarl ripped from his throat. It was an enigma snarl. It was meant to paralyze, to trigger absolute submission. The air pressure spiked. Threat, intruder, danger. My Omega biology flared, but not with submission. The bitter scent of dried orange peels and old paper exploded from my skin, flooding the massive foyer. It wasn't a challenge, it was a heavy, suffocating blanket of maternal absolute zero. Down. Stop. I am pregnant, and I do not have the patience for this. The boys froze. The growling faltered, turning into confused, muddy whines. I didn't coo at them. I didn't kneel to their level. I leaned against the nearest stack of cardboard boxes and rubbed my temples. "Which one of you is the loudest?" I asked, my voice echoing in the dead silent hall. The boy on the far left pointed silently at Leo. "Right," I sighed. "Listen to me, bite size. I'm tired, my feet are swelling, and I have exactly 40 minutes before the flash sale on hypoallergenic wipes ends. If you want to tear something apart, don't bite the furniture. Tear these boxes." I kicked a massive, empty cardboard box toward them. Enigmas were built to destroy. I was just giving them a highly productive target. Leo stared at the box. He looked at his brothers. Then, with a feral little grunt, he lunged at the cardboard, ripping it apart with his bare hands. The other 3 immediately joined in, shredding the thick Amazon packaging into neat, flat, recyclable pieces. "Good," I deadpanned, sitting on a slightly smaller box. "You the one in the blue shirt, Toby. "Come here. Hold my iPad. When this timer hits exactly 0, you tap this green button. If you do it fast enough, I'll let you pop the bubble wrap." Toby's slate eyes widened. He scrambled over, taking the iPad with profound, deadly seriousness. By noon, the feral terrors of the Vance estate had been successfully drafted. Wyatt was my designated box shredder. Sam was organizing the plastic basins by color. Leo was aggressively punching numbers into a calculator because I told him math was a form of violence against corporations. I sat in the center of the organized chaos, surrounded by a fortress of Diapers baby wipes and the reassuring scent of dried orange peels. For the first time in months, the gnawing anxiety in my chest settled. It was 9 at night when the heavy oak front doors swung open. The winter wind howled into the foyer, bringing him with it. Dominic Vance. He was wearing a dark wool overcoat, but his tie was pulled loose, and there was a distinct, terrifying smear of dark crimson on his crisp white shirt cuff. The scent of crushed cedar rolled off him in suffocating aggressive waves, laced with the metallic tang of copper and incoming storms. He had just returned from a purge in Manhattan. He looked like a god of war stepping into his temple. He took one step into the foyer. A sharp squeak echoed from the floor. Dominic froze. The billionaire syndicate boss slowly lifted his expensive leather dress shoe. Sitting innocently underneath his heel was a bright yellow rubber duck. I sat on a pile of flattened cardboard, a mug of hot water in my hands, and stared at him. The 4 Enigma boys didn't even look up. Toby was too busy aggressively tracking a shipping confirmation on the iPad. Dominic looked at the duck. He looked at the mountain of bulk toilet paper. He looked at his feral, bloodthirsty sons who were currently sitting quietly in a circle of shredded cardboard. Finally, his pitch-black, dilated pupils locked onto me. "That was a free gift with purchase," I said, my voice cutting through the heavy, violent tension in the room. "Please don't step on it again. It ruins the structural integrity." The lethal Enigma aura stuttered. Dominic just stood there, the blood on his cuff completely forgotten, staring at me as if I were a hallucination. The ruthless monster of the eastern seaboard had absolutely no idea what to do with a cynical pregnant Omega who cared more about plastic toys than his Mafia empire. I took a slow sip of my hot water. It wasn't a fairy tale, but as I watched the terrifying boss of the underworld gingerly pick up the rubber duck, I figured it was a decent start. By week 14, my center of gravity had officially shifted, and so had my tolerance for billionaire aesthetics. The guest bedroom they had assigned me was a masterpiece of modern interior design. It was also completely, utterly useless. The king-sized mattress was too soft, the silk blend duvet was too slippery, and the minimalist decor offered zero tactical advantage if someone kicked the door in. But more than that, it was cold. Not a physical cold, the climate control hummed at a perfect, sterile 68 degrees, but an emotional hollow freeze that seeped into my joints. My biology was loudly, aggressively demanding a bunker. Most pregnant Omegas nested with plush pillows, cashmere throws, and expensive silks. I was a survivor from the rotting apartments of Queens. I trusted things that were durable, cheap, and easily replaceable. Which is why by Tuesday afternoon, the far corner of my massive, pristine bedroom looked like a recycling plant. I had dragged 20 heavy-duty, double-corrugated Amazon boxes into a semicircle against the wall. I lined the bottom with the thick industrial bubble wrap that had protected the plastic wash basins I'd bought on clearance. Over that went the thermal fleece blankets I had snagged for $7 apiece during a lightning deal. It was a fortress of absolute, unapologetic poverty. But it was missing something. The scent was wrong. It just smelled like synthetic glue and my own burnt orange peel distress. I needed an anchor. I needed weight. Without entirely processing what I was doing, I waddled down the grand staircase to the foyer coat closet. It was a dark, cedar-lined room filled with tailored suits and expensive outerwear. I bypassed the Italian leather jackets and grabbed a heavy, dark gray cashmere scarf draped over a hanger. It belonged to Dominic Vance. The moment I pulled it against my chest, the overwhelming scent of crushed cedar ozone and incoming storms hit the back of my throat. It was terrifyingly dominant. It was the scent of a predator who routinely ordered broken kneecaps before his morning coffee. My pregnant hormone-addled brain instantly categorized it as safe. I dragged the scarf back up to my cardboard bunker, wrapped it around my neck like a protective cowl, and curled into a tight ball on the bubble wrap. the orange peel scent pouring off my skin sweetened mixing with the cedar until the corner of the room smelled like a chaotic, bizarrely peaceful forest. I closed my eyes and actually slept. I wasn't the only one adapting to the new ecosystem. The entire heavily fortified mansion was undergoing a surreal, humiliating transformation. I was in the kitchen 2 days later, aggressively peeling an apple when Marcus walked in. The 250-pound enforcer, whose neck tattoos actively detailed his confirmed kills, was holding a plastic bottle of fabric softener and looking deeply distressed. Liam Marcus grunted, glancing over his shoulder to make sure none of the other heavily armed guards were listening. The lavender or the unscented? I didn't look up from my apple. Unscented. You buy the lavender and your kid is going to break out in hives, and then you'll have to pay for a pediatric dermatologist. It's a bad return on investment. Marcus nodded solemnly, tapping the screen of his phone. Right, unscented. Also, my wife says thanks for the promo code on the bottle warmer. We got 20% off. Tell her to leave a 5-star review so my account gets the bonus points I deadpanned. It had started slowly. First, Marcus asked me how I managed to get the bulk diapers shipped without the luxury tax. Then a sniper named Rossi wanted to know if the hypoallergenic wipes were actually tear-free. Within a month, the most lethal crime syndicate on the eastern seaboard had secretly morphed into an underground diaper club. I was their undisputed cynical logistics king. They were terrifying mobsters, but inflation affected everyone. Even the 4 Enigma terrors had fallen in line. They had given up on trying to intimidate me. You can't dominate someone who is more concerned about a delayed delivery than a growling display. That evening, as a heavy snowstorm battered the estate, I found the quadruplets standing silently at the threshold of my bedroom. Leo, Toby, Sam, and Wyatt stared at the cardboard fort in the corner. They had massive custom-built race car beds in their own wing of the house, but their bruised slate eyes were fixated on my recycling bin. The air pressure in the room shifted. My maternal instincts flared, flooding the space with the heavy, sweet scent of warm orange peels. Sanctuary. Without a word, Toby broke rank. He shuffled across the hardwood floor, clutching a chewed-up stuffed bear, and climbed over the Amazon boxes. He curled up on the bubble wrap right against my side. Leo sneered at the cardboard for exactly 3 seconds before yielding to his own biology, dragging Sam and Wyatt in with him. Within minutes, I was pinned beneath 4 feral, identical toddlers, all of them breathing in the crushed cedar of their father's stolen scarf and the calming citrus of my pheromones. It was ridiculous. It was a hazard. I didn't move an inch. The digital clock on the nightstand read 2:14 in the morning when the heavy bedroom door silently swung open. The temperature in the room instantly plummeted. The air soured with the sharp tang of raw electricity and cold winter wind. Dominic Vance stepped into the room. He was still wearing his tailored suit, his broad shoulders casting a massive, terrifying shadow across the floorboards. He stopped dead in his tracks. The syndicate boss stared at the corner of the room. He looked at the discarded cardboard boxes. He looked at his 4 aggressive, untamable sons who were currently sleeping soundly in a pile of cheap fleece. And then his pitch-black eyes locked onto me wide awake in the center of the pile, buried up to my nose in his cashmere scarf. The silence was deafening. I braced myself. I expected the Enigma Fury. I expected him to drag me out by my arm for turning his heirs into alley cats sleeping in trash. Dominic let out a breath that sounded like grinding stone. He unbuttoned his suit jacket, tossing it over the nearest chair. He didn't yell. He didn't issue a command. Instead, the towering billionaire walked slowly across the room, his expensive leather shoes making no sound. He lowered his massive frame to the floor, right on the outside edge of the cardboard fort. He sat with his back pressed flush against the glass of the window, directly blocking the freezing draft that was seeping through the frame. He didn't look at me. He just rested his forearms on his knees, staring into the dark room. "You stole my scarf." Dominic's voice was a low, vibrating rumble that vibrated against the cardboard walls of my bunker. The structural integrity of this fort required better insulation. I whispered back, my voice defensive, though my heart was hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. "And you left it in the closet. It's basically abandoned property." Dominic didn't argue. The suffocating, terrifying Enigma aura completely receded, leaving only the deep, grounding hum of cedar. He shifted his weight, his broad shoulder pressing firmly against the outside of my cardboard wall. It was a silent, absolute declaration. He wasn't tearing the nest down. He was reinforcing it. "Go to sleep, Liam," the mob boss murmured into the dark. I pulled the cashmere scarf a little tighter around my neck, the bitter cynicism in my chest cracking just a fraction. I was sold to pay a debt, sleeping in a pile of garbage bags and bubble wrap guarded by a monster. Yet as the snow raged outside the window, I had never felt warmer in my entire life. There is a distinct agonizing psychological torture in watching a delivery tracking bar stall at Out for Delivery. It was a Tuesday afternoon, mid-February. I was 20 weeks pregnant, currently sitting on the kitchen island, aggressively refreshing the tracking page on my tablet every 30 seconds. My target was a highly coveted wireless smart vacuum cleaner and exactly 500 packs of hypoallergenic water-based wet wipes. I had stalked the manufacturer's website for 3 consecutive days to secure a 65% bulk discount. It was my masterpiece. It was supposed to arrive at 10 in the morning. It was now 2:15 in the afternoon. "Marcus," Leary said, not looking up from the screen. The massive enforcer who had been quietly making a protein shake in the corner stiffened. "Yes, Liam." "Call the gatehouse. If the delivery driver is lost on the perimeter road again, tell them to send a tactical rover to guide him in. If my wipes freeze in the back of a truck, the moisture content is ruined." Marcus pulled out his encrypted radio, muttering into it. I watched his broad shoulders tense. The dull, bored expression of a Mafia guard vanished, replaced by a sudden rigid professionalism. He lowered the radio, looking at me with the kind of hesitation usually reserved for defusing a live explosive. Liam, Marcus started his gravelly voice, dropping an octave. "The truck isn't lost. It was intercepted." I slowly lowered the tablet. "Intercepted? You mean delayed at a way station?" "I mean hijacked," Marcus said grimly. "A rival outfit out of Brooklyn, the Reyes cartel. They've been trying to disrupt Mr. Vance's supply lines. They hit the transport on the expressway. They thought it was a weapons shipment disguised under domestic manifest." The kitchen fell dead silent. For a normal person, losing an online order is an annoyance. You call customer service, you get a refund, you move on. But I wasn't a normal person. I was a heavily pregnant Omega whose brain had been permanently rewired by poverty and starvation. In a fraction of a second, I wasn't in a billionaire's heavily fortified mansion anymore. I was back in that freezing, rotting apartment in Queens. I was staring at an empty pantry, shivering, knowing that no one was coming to help. That cold, primal terror clawed its way up my throat, but this time it didn't turn into despair. It turned into absolute feral rage. They took my baby's supplies. My Omega biology violently detonated. The usually sweet scent of orange peels instantly scorched, flooding the massive kitchen with the sharp, acrid stench of burnt citrus and raw panic. It was a distress signal, but it was aggressive, the scent of a cornered animal preparing to bite. Before I even realized I was moving, I slid off the counter. I marched past the high-end espresso machine, grabbed a solid steel meat tenderizer from the knife block, and headed straight for the foyer. "Get the car," I barked at Marcus, my vision actually tunneling with adrenaline. "We're going to Brooklyn." "Liam, wait, are you insane? You can't." I burst through the swinging kitchen doors into the main hall, completely unhinged. The sheer force of my distressed pheromones acted like a siren. Instantly, the library doors flew open. Leo, Toby, Sam, and Wyatt spilled out. The second the 4 Enigma toddlers caught the scent of my burnt, panicked pheromones, their eyes blew pitch black. Their small chests heaved, and a synchronized, terrifyingly deep snarl echoed through the hall. They didn't know what was threatening their pregnant Omega, but they were entirely prepared to tear the house apart to stop it. "Who took it?" Leo hissed, his small hands curling into fists, his fangs bared. "The Reyes cartel," I snapped, gripping the steel meat tenderizer. "Get your coats bite-size. We're doing a hostile takeover." "Liam, stop." The voice hit the foyer like a physical shockwave. The air pressure plummeted, and the scent of crushed cedar and ozone slammed into my burning citrus, heavy and suffocating. Dominic Vance stood at the top of the grand staircase. He wasn't wearing his suit jacket. His sleeves were rolled up his tie, discarded. He took the stairs 3 at a time, moving with terrifying, predatory speed. He reached the bottom step and immediately stepped in front of me, blocking the front doors. "Move, Dominic!" I growled, my voice trembling with a panic I couldn't control. "They took the wipes. They took the vacuum. I have to get it back. I have to. If I don't have it, we won't have anything when the baby comes. I have to be ready." My voice cracked on the last word. The steel tenderizer slipped from my shaking hand, clattering loudly against the marble floor. The cynical, sarcastic armor I wore every day completely shattered, leaving only the traumatized, desperate survivor underneath. Dominic didn't yell. He didn't order his guards to restrain me. He stepped forward and wrapped his massive hands around my shoulders, pulling me flush against his chest. The cedar scent completely enveloped me, thick and uncompromisingly protective. I grabbed fistfuls of his dress shirt, gasping as the adrenaline crashed, leaving me shivering violently against him. Dominic rested his chin on the top of my head. He took a slow, deep breath, inhaling the acrid stench of my fear. When he looked up over my head, the exhausted father was gone. The man staring at the heavy mahogany doors was the ruthless, terrifying apex predator of the eastern seaboard. Marcus Dominic's voice was a dead, hollow scrape. It was the sound of an executioner. "Sir, take Liam back to his room. Double the perimeter guard." Dominic gently untangled my hands from his shirt, stepping back. His slate eyes were entirely swallowed by black. "I am going to Brooklyn." "Dominic, you don't have to." I started, my voice hoarse. "They touched what belongs to my household." Dominic interrupted his tone, leaving zero room for negotiation. "They terrified you. I will handle it." He didn't take a security detail. He just grabbed his heavy wool overcoat and walked out into the freezing winter afternoon. The next 5 hours were agonizing. I sat in my cardboard bunker in the bedroom, surrounded by the 4 boys who refused to leave my side. The house was dead quiet, save for the howling wind against the glass. I had sent a billionaire mob boss into a cartel war over baby wipes. The absurdity of it made me want to laugh, but the cold dread in my stomach made me want to throw up. It was just past 8 at night when the bedroom door finally opened. The scent of crushed cedar hit the room first, but beneath it was the sharp metallic tang of copper blood and the distinct sulfurous smell of gunpowder. Dominic stood in the doorway. His expensive overcoat was torn at the shoulder and his knuckles were bruised and split, bleeding sluggishly onto his cuffs. He looked like he had just walked through hell and dismantled it with his bare hands, but it wasn't the blood that made my breath catch. In his left hand, the terrifying syndicate boss of the East Coast was holding a pristine sealed box containing a smart vacuum cleaner. Slung over his right shoulder, secured by thick shipping straps, were 3 massive cardboard crates of hypoallergenic wet wipes. He walked across the room, completely ignoring the stunned silence, and set the boxes down gently at the edge of my cardboard nest. He didn't speak about the violence. He didn't mention the cartel. He just looked down at me, his chest heaving slightly, the terrifying enigma aura receding into absolute quiet devotion. "The manufacturer warranty on the vacuum is intact," Dominic murmured, wiping a smear of blood from his jaw with the back of his hand. I stared at the boxes, then up at the bruised, exhausted, beautiful monster standing in my bedroom. The realization crashed over me heavier than any debt. We had crossed the line. This wasn't a transaction anymore. You don't burn down a rival cartel for a hostage. You only do that for a partner. The gesture was probably supposed to be romantic. In the world of billionaires and ruthless crime syndicates, I assumed handing your pregnant Omega a leather-bound portfolio over breakfast was standard courtship protocol. It was a Thursday morning. I was sitting at the massive mahogany dining table 22 weeks along and aggressively devouring a plate of dry toast. Dominic sat at the opposite end, sipping black coffee. He was wearing a crisp navy suit, looking every bit the apex predator of the eastern seaboard. But the scent of crushed cedar leaking into the room was laced with a strange, hesitant anxiety. He slid the thick leather-bound folder across the polished wood. It stopped exactly inches from my plate. "What is this?" I asked, suspiciously eyeing it, like it might explode. Did I exceed the credit limit on the black card? Because I can explain the bulk purchase of pacifiers. They were buy one, get 2 free, Dominic. It would have been fiscally irresponsible to leave them. "It is not a bill." Liam Dominic rumbled, his voice dropping to that deep, gravelly register that always made my spine tingle. "It is the deed to a manufacturing facility in New Jersey. They are the primary producers of the hypoallergenic wipes and the smart vacuums you favor." I froze a piece of toast halfway to my mouth. I blinked my brain, struggling to process the string of words. "You bought a factory." "I bought the parent company," Dominic corrected smoothly, leaning back in his chair. "After the incident with the Reyes cartel, I assessed the vulnerabilities in your supply chain. Owning the manufacturing and distribution channels eliminates the risk of future delays. The factory is now legally in your name." He looked at me, his bruised slate eyes waiting for a reaction. He was waiting for gratitude. He was waiting for the beaming, submissive joy of an Omega who had just been handed absolute financial security. Instead, a hot, suffocating wave of pure irritation washed over me. My pheromones flared the scent of bitter orange peels, spiking sharply in the quiet dining room. "You bought the factory," I repeated, my voice dangerously flat. I dropped the toast onto my plate. "Dominic, I spent 3 weeks tracking those wipes. I analyzed price charts. I found a loophole in their bulk shipping policy. It was a flawless logistical victory. And your solution to a shipping delay is to just buy the entire corporation." Dominic frowned, clearly caught off guard by my anger. The Enigma aura thickened, defensive and confused. "I eliminated the problem. You require these items for the child. Now you have an infinite secure supply." "I don't want an infinite supply," I snapped, pushing the leather folder away as if it burned. "I want the discount, Dominic. Finding a deal is the only thing I have control over in this ridiculous bionic fortress. I was sold to pay a gambling debt. I don't own my own life. Squeezing a 60% discount out of a corporate website was my way of surviving. By handing me the factory, you didn't give me a gift. You just reminded me that you can buy anything, including me." The words hung in the air, ugly and raw. Dominic's jaw tightened. The pitch-black dilation in his eyes receded, leaving behind a stark, hollow gray. The crushing, dominant cedar scent in the room didn't turn violent. It collapsed. It pulled back so fast, it left a physical vacuum in the air, replaced by the terrifying, suffocating smell of absolute grief. He stood up abruptly. He didn't look angry. He looked exhausted. "I am not trying to buy you," Liam Dominic said, his voice a harsh, broken rasp. He turned his back to me, gripping the edge of the tall windows, staring out at the snow. "I am trying to keep you safe, and I do not know any other way to do it." I stopped breathing. The cynical armor I wore cracked right down the center. Their mother, Dominic, started his voice so quiet I had to strain to hear it over the hum of the heater. He was talking about the quadruplets. She died giving birth. Enigma genetics are aggressive. They act like a parasite. They tore her apart from the inside. I stood in a hospital room with millions of dollars in my bank account, and I watched her bleed to death. I couldn't buy her a single extra second. He turned his head slightly, his profile carved out of stone and shadows. "I break things, Liam. I am a violent man who rules a violent world. I don't know how to love people gently. I only know how to build walls around them and buy the ground they walk on so nothing can ever touch them again. If I don't control the environment, I am terrified I will ruin you too." The silence in the dining room was deafening. The mob boss had completely stripped away his armor, leaving a terrified, broken man bleeding out on his own marble floor. My heart hammered against my ribs. My biology reacted instantly, not with fear, but with a fierce, overwhelming surge of maternal protection. The burnt scent of my pheromones sweetened into warm citrus and dry paper. I pushed my chair back, ignoring the dull ache in my swollen belly, and walked across the room. I stopped right behind his broad back. I didn't say anything comforting or poetic. I just reached down and took his right hand. His knuckles were still slightly scarred from beating a cartel boss to a pulp for my baby wipes. I pulled my cracked smartphone from my sweatpants pocket. "Take out your phone, Dominic," I said softly. He looked down at me, utterly bewildered. Slowly, he reached into his suit jacket and pulled out a sleek, encrypted device. "Open the App Store." I instructed, my thumb rubbing soothing circles into the back of his massive hand. "Download the shopping app. I am going to teach you how to digitally clip a 10% discount coupon for organic laundry detergent." Dominic stared at me, the Enigma confusion completely short-circuiting his brain. "Liam, I can just buy the—" "No," I interrupted fiercely, looking up into his bruised slate eyes. "You don't need to buy the factory. You don't need to control the supply chain. You just need to stand here with me and clip the stupid coupon. I don't need your millions, Dominic. And I definitely don't need your power." I stepped closer, pressing my forehead against his chest right over his racing heart. "I just need you." Dominic's breath hitched. For a long second, nobody moved. Then his massive arms wrapped securely around my shoulders, burying his face in my hair. He didn't say a word. We just stood there in the quiet dining room, a ruthless syndicate boss and a cynical Omega, staring at a flashing digital coupon, finally realizing we were entirely hopelessly trapped by each other. The upstate New York spring was finally trying to break through the frost, but inside the grand foyer, the air had suddenly turned toxic. It wasn't the sharp bite of ozone or the heavy grounding thrum of crushed cedar. It was sour beer, cheap synthetic cologne, and the pathetic, unmistakable stench of unwashed desperation. Ricky. I stood at the top of the sweeping marble staircase, my hand resting protectively over the heavy solid curve of my third trimester belly. Down below, Marcus and another heavily armed enforcer had my ex-alpha pinned face down against the pristine floorboards. Ricky was thrashing his cheap denim jacket, riding up his boots, scuffing the Italian marble. "You didn't say he was knocked up." Ricky shouted, his voice muffled by the floor. He craned his neck, spotting me on the stairs. "Liam, tell him that's my kid. I deserve a higher payout for a bred Omega. If he doesn't pay up, I'm going to the FBI. I'll tell them Vance is running an underground trafficking ring." The words hung in the air, ugly and raw. A few months ago, this would have broken me. I would have felt the crushing humiliation of being a transaction, a piece of meat haggled over by a coward. But as I looked down at the man who had traded me for 50 grand in gambling debts, I felt absolutely nothing but a hollow, scraping disgust. Before I could say a word, the temperature in the foyer plummeted. Dominic stepped out of his private study. He wasn't wearing a suit today, just a dark sweater and slacks, but he looked like a towering monument to violence. His pupils were blown completely black. The terrifying, suffocating scent of an Enigma's territorial fury flooded the room, so thick and oppressive that even Marcus visibly flinched. "Take him to the soundproof holding room in the basement," Dominic ordered, his voice grinding like glacial ice. "I will handle him personally." "Wait," I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the heavy Enigma pheromones like a scalpel. I descended the stairs slowly, my joints aching, my oversized gray sweater swallowing my frame. As I reached the bottom step, the library doors flew open. The quadruplets arrived. Leo, Toby, Sam, and Wyatt didn't act like human children. They moved like a coordinated pack of feral wolves. They hit the foyer and instantly caught the scent of Ricky's threat. Leo dropped into a low crouch directly in front of my swollen stomach, baring his small teeth. A vibrating chest-deep Enigma snarl ripped from the 5-year-old's throat. Toby and Sam flanked my legs, grabbing fistfuls of my sweatpants, glaring at Ricky with lethal bruised slate eyes. Ricky froze, staring at the miniature monsters guarding me. "What the hell are those?" "They're my kids," I stated flatly. My Omega biology surged, releasing a massive, suffocating blanket of maternal defense. The scent of warm citrus and dry paper pushed against Dominic's violent cedar, demanding absolute control of the room. Dominic blinked, the pitch black in his eyes, flickering back to gray as my pheromones grounded him. He stepped back, yielding the floor to me. I walked forward, stopping exactly 2 feet from Ricky's head. "We are not taking him to the basement, Dominic. The structural integrity of the soundproofing is questionable, and I am not dealing with a murder cleanup during my 3rd trimester. I pulled my cracked smartphone from my pocket and calmly dialed the police. "What are you doing?" Ricky sneered, straining against Marcus's knee. "You're calling the cops. He's a mob boss, Liam. They'll arrest him." "Yes, hello, dispatcher," I said into the phone, my voice polite and utterly deadpan. "I need police assistance at the Vance estate. We have an erratic trespasser on the property. He appears to be under the influence of narcotics and is making extortion threats. Yes, my security has him detained. We will hold." I lowered the phone and looked down at my ex. "You're illegally trespassing on a highly secure, privately owned estate. You probably drove here with a suspended license, and I guarantee Marcus can find a bag of cheap meth in your left pocket before the sirens get here. Guess who the local precinct is going to believe?" Ricky's face drained of all color. He realized with absolute horror that I wasn't playing by the rules of the underworld. I was using the sterile bureaucratic nightmare of the legal system to bury him. 15 minutes later, local law enforcement hauled a screaming handcuffed Ricky into the back of a squad car. It was ruthlessly practical, completely legal, and entirely bloodless. The heavy mahogany doors clicked shut, plunging the foyer back into silence. Dominic didn't say a word. He just turned and walked back toward his master study. The heavy scent of cedar trailing behind him felt strange, hesitant, almost sad. I patted Leo on the head, told the boys to go wash their hands for lunch, and followed the syndicate boss into the room. A fire was roaring in the massive stone hearth, casting dancing shadows against the sterile white walls. Dominic was standing by his desk. He picked up a thick manila folder and held it out to me. "What is this?" I asked, my heart skipping a weird erratic beat. "You handled him with clinical efficiency," Dominic rumbles, his voice rough. "But it proved my greatest fear. My world will always bleed into yours. You shouldn't have to navigate extortion cartels and violence. You deserve a normal life." I opened the folder. Inside was the original debt transfer agreement with my forged signature. Next to it was a stack of legal documents printed on heavy, expensive paper. "These are emancipation documents," Dominic explained, forcing himself to look away from me. "They legally declare that you have no financial obligations to me or my syndicate. Furthermore, it establishes a fully funded trust for you and your child. If you sign them, you are free to walk out that door. You will never have to worry about money or safety again." He was giving me an out. The ruthless, terrifying monster of the eastern seaboard was deliberately suppressing his dominant enigma biology, refusing to influence my choice because he loved me enough to let me go. I stared at the documents. It was everything I had ever wanted. Freedom. A clean slate. I thought about the quiet. I thought about waking up without the smell of static electricity and ozone. I thought about drinking out of a normal glass instead of the neon green plastic cups I had forced on the quadruplets. It sounded agonizingly, suffocatingly lonely. I looked at the heavy gold pen clipped to the folder. I pulled it off and dropped it onto the floor. It rolled away, disappearing under the edge of an expensive Persian rug. Then, without breaking eye contact, I tossed the entire folder directly into the roaring fireplace. Dominic gasped, his massive frame jerking forward, but he froze as the thick paper curled, turned black, and disintegrated into floating ash. "I'm keeping the plastic cups," I said softly, my voice shaking just a fraction. Dominic's breath hitched. He looked completely paralyzed. I closed the distance between us. I reached out my trembling fingers, grasping the lapel of his dark sweater. "Your kids are feral terrors. Your house looks like a sterilized morgue, and you smell like a lumberjack caught in a hurricane." Liam Dominic breathed out a raw, devastated sound. "I'm not property," I said fiercely, pulling him down by the sweater until our foreheads rested against each other. "I'm not a transaction. I'm a partner. I manage the money. I manage the kids. And I'm not leaving this bionic fortress." Dominic's hands came up massive and trembling, framing my face. He didn't push his dominance. He simply closed his eyes and exhaled a long, shuddering breath of absolute devotion. When he kissed me, it was clumsy. Our noses bumped, my heavy stomach pressed awkwardly against his thigh, and he was terrified of holding me too tight. But it tasted like black coffee and cedar, and it grounded me completely. The debt was entirely gone, burned to ash, leaving only the fierce, imperfect reality of us. It was late May when the ice finally thawed around the Vance estate. The towering pine trees outside shook off the last remnants of the upstate New York winter, but the real seasonal shift had happened inside the walls of the bionic fortress. The sterilization protocols had officially surrendered to absolute vibrant chaos. There was no more pristine Italian marble visible in the main living area. It was completely covered by interlocking primary colored foam mats that I had aggressively secured during a 48-hour clearance event. The heavy, oppressive scent of synthetic lemon cleaner had been permanently banished. Now the mansion smelled like unscented baby lotion, the grounding hum of crushed cedar, and the sweet, permanent warmth of my own citrus pheromones. I leaned against the doorframe of the transformed sunroom, a mug of lukewarm peppermint tea in my hand, taking inventory of my empire. 3 weeks ago, Maya was born. She wasn't a biological enigma anomaly. She was just a healthy, incredibly loud, fiercely demanding little girl who had instantly brought the most lethal crime syndicate on the eastern seaboard to its knees. "Liam," a gravelly voice rumbled from the hallway. I turned my head. Marcus, the 250-pound enforcer with the neck tattoos, was standing there holding a digital thermometer and looking deeply stressed. He had an encrypted earpiece in his right ear and a burp cloth thrown casually over his left shoulder. "Talk to me, Marcus," I said, taking a sip of my tea. "It's the bottle warmer," Boss Marcus said, his brow furrowed. "The instruction manual says setting 3 is for breast milk, but Rossi read on a parenting blog that setting 2 preserves the antibodies better. We have a tactical disagreement in the kitchen." I let out a long sigh. "Tell Rossi that if he trusts a random blog over the manufacturer's thermal output guidelines, I am going to revoke his VIP discount code for the tactical diaper bags. Setting 3. Don't overthink it." "Understood," Marcus nodded sharply, tapping his earpiece. "You hear that, Rossi? Stand down. Setting 3. Marcus gave me a crisp, respectful nod and marched back toward the kitchen to manage the underground diaper club. I shook my head, hiding a smile behind my mug, and looked back into the sunroom. In the center of the room sat a massive wooden playpen, and surrounding it, acting as a highly aggressive miniature Secret Service detail, were the quadruplets. Leo, Toby, Sam, and Wyatt were on their hands and knees, their bruised slate eyes completely fixated on the tiny bundle resting inside the bassinet. There was no growling. There was no scent of raw, sparking wire or feral aggression. Their Enigma biology had completely rewired itself around a single undeniable directive: protect the tiny sister. "Don't touch her hands," Leo whispered fiercely, smacking Wyatt's arm away. "She's sleeping. If you wake her up, Liam is going to take away our neon cups." "I just wanted to see if her fingers work," Wyatt grumbled, clutching a chewed-up stuffed bear to his chest. "They work," Toby muttered, his nose pressed flat against the mesh siding of the playpen. "She punched Dad in the eye yesterday. It was awesome." I snorted quietly into my tea, my gaze drifting from the 4 toddlers to the man sitting on the floor just a few feet away. Dominic Vance, the apex predator of the underworld, was currently sitting cross-legged on a scratchy, highly durable synthetic rug. He wasn't wearing a tailored suit. He was wearing a soft gray Henley shirt and sweatpants, his dark hair falling messily over his forehead. He was holding an Allen wrench in his scarred, massive hand, staring at a set of instruction manuals with a level of sheer, unadulterated hostility he usually reserved for rival cartels. "This is structurally unsound," Dominic grumbled, wiping a bead of sweat from his temple. He glared at the wooden dowels scattered around him. "The load-bearing capacity of this crib is a joke, Liam. I should have just contracted my architects to weld one out of titanium." "Dominic," I said, walking into the room and lowering myself onto the foam mats beside him. "It's a crib. She weighs 9 pounds. We don't need it to withstand a ballistic missile strike. We just need it to hold a mattress." "I don't trust the particle board," he muttered stubbornly, though his broad shoulders relaxed the second I sat down. The crushing scent of his cedar pheromones wrapped around me instantly a heavy, invisible blanket of absolute devotion. "I bought it for 70% off during a warehouse liquidation." I reminded him, gently taking the Allen wrench out of his hand. "If you try to replace it with a titanium cage, I am going to take your credit card away." Dominic turned his head, his pitch-black pupils dilating slightly as he looked at me. The exhausted, terrified monster I had met months ago was gone. The man looking at me now was just a father completely hopelessly in love with the chaotic life we had built. He didn't argue about the particle board. He just reached out his calloused hand, cupping the side of my face, his thumb gently brushing against my cheekbone. "You are a menace to the global economy," Dominic murmured, a rare, genuine smile tugging at the corner of his lips. "I am fiscally responsible," I corrected, leaning into his touch. "There is a difference." Dominic let out a low, chest-deep rumble that sounded exactly like a purr. He leaned in, pressing a soft, lingering kiss to my forehead, then my temple, and finally my lips. It was warm tasting of black coffee, completely erasing the last lingering ghosts of my past. I rested my head against his broad shoulder, watching our 4 feral boys bicker quietly over who got to show Maya the yellow rubber duck first. I had arrived at this fortress as a transaction, a $50,000 debt sold by a coward expecting to be swallowed whole by a bionic monster in a sterile cage. I had expected to survive on scraps and cynicism, but as I sat on the cheap foam mat surrounded by boxes of bulk-ordered baby wipes, a Mafia security team arguing over breast milk temperatures, and an Enigma boss who was willing to fight furniture for me, I realized something. I didn't just survive the underworld. I had aggressively, systematically, and legally bought it out. And the best part was I didn't even have to pay for shipping.